Marcus had served the royal palace for 15 years, watching 3 generations of kings rule from behind the same stone walls. His weathered hands gripped his spear with the same dedication as the day he first took his oath. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courtyard as he made his usual rounds, unaware that this would be his final walk as a royal guard. The palace bustled with its typical morning activity. Servants hurried through corridors carrying trays of food, nobles discussed politics in hushed tones, and fellow guards nodded respectfully as Marcus passed. He knew every corner of this massive structure, every secret passage, and every hidden door. The knowledge made him valuable, perhaps too valuable for his own good. As Marcus approached the East Tower, he noticed something unusual. The heavy wooden door that led to the restricted archives stood slightly open. This door remained locked at all times, accessible only to the king and his most trusted advisors. Marcus had passed it thousands of times, never seeing it anything but securely shut. His training kicked in immediately. Moving closer, he could hear voices drifting from within. The conversation was heated, though the words remained unclear. Marcus recognized one voice as belonging to Lord Chancellor Aldrich, the king's right-hand man for over 2 decades. The other voice was unfamiliar, speaking in a foreign accent that Marcus couldn't place. "The shipments must continue," the stranger was saying. "Our arrangement has been profitable for everyone involved." Marcus pressed himself against the cold stone wall, his heart racing. Shipments? What shipments could be so important that they required secret meetings in the restricted archives? "The king suspects nothing?" The foreign voice continued. "Nothing at all," came Aldrich's response. "He believes the treasury is simply doing well due to improved trade relations. He has no idea about our real source of income." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Whatever they were discussing, it involved deceiving the king. As a loyal guard, he had sworn to protect not just the royal family's lives, but their interests as well. This conversation suggested something far more sinister than simple political maneuvering. The sound of footsteps approaching the door forced Marcus to move quickly. He ducked behind a nearby pillar, watching as the stranger emerged first. The man was tall and thin, dressed in expensive clothes that marked him as wealthy but not noble. His face was sharp and calculating, with eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Lord Chancellor Aldrich followed moments later, looking around nervously before closing and locking the door behind him. The 2 men walked in opposite directions without acknowledging each other, as if they were complete strangers who had simply happened to be in the same place. Marcus waited several minutes before moving from his hiding spot. His mind raced with questions. What kind of shipments were they discussing? Why was the king being kept in the dark? And most importantly, what should he do with this information? Over the next few days, Marcus found himself paying closer attention to the Chancellor's movements. He noticed patterns he had never observed before. Aldrich often disappeared for hours at a time, claiming to be reviewing trade documents. He received visitors at odd hours, always meeting them in different locations throughout the palace. Most telling of all, he seemed nervous whenever the king asked detailed questions about the kingdom's finances. Marcus also began noticing other suspicious activities around the palace. Guards he didn't recognize appeared on certain shifts, always posted near the loading docks where supply wagons came and went. These guards wore the same uniforms but carried themselves differently, more like mercenaries than loyal soldiers. The breakthrough came on a rainy Thursday evening. Marcus was making his final rounds when he spotted several figures moving through the courtyard toward the storage buildings. They carried themselves with purpose, and something about their movement suggested they were trying to avoid being seen. Following at a safe distance, Marcus watched as the group unlocked one of the smaller storage buildings that supposedly contained old furniture and unused decorations. Instead of dusty chairs and forgotten tapestries, the building held wooden crates stacked from floor to ceiling. The foreign man from the archives meeting was there, directing workers as they loaded several crates onto a plain wagon. The crates were unmarked, but they were clearly heavy, requiring 2 men each to lift them safely. "Be careful with those," the stranger hissed. "Each one represents more gold than you'll see in a lifetime." Marcus crept closer, trying to get a better look at what was being loaded. As one of the workers pried open a crate to check its contents, Marcus caught a glimpse of what lay inside. His breath caught in his throat. The crate was filled with gleaming weapons and armor, but not the kind used by the royal army. These were foreign-made, with symbols and markings that Marcus didn't recognize. More importantly, they appeared to be military-grade equipment far superior to anything the kingdom's own forces possessed. The implications hit Marcus like a physical blow. The kingdom was secretly selling advanced weapons to unknown buyers. This wasn't just about money. It was about potentially arming enemies or destabilizing neighboring regions. The king, who prided himself on maintaining peace through diplomacy rather than force, was unknowingly funding what could amount to acts of war. As the wagon rolled away into the night, Marcus realized his position had become extremely dangerous. He possessed knowledge that could destroy some of the most powerful people in the kingdom. At the same time, his loyalty to the crown demanded that he expose this betrayal, regardless of the personal cost. The next morning, Marcus requested a private audience with the king, claiming to have important security information. The request was granted for later that day, but as Marcus prepared for the meeting, he noticed that he was being watched more closely than usual. When the appointed time arrived, Marcus was escorted not to the king's private chambers but to Lord Chancellor Aldrich's office. The chancellor sat behind his desk with a knowing smile, while two of the unfamiliar guards flanked the doorway behind Marcus. "I understand you wanted to discuss palace security," Aldrich said smoothly. "I thought it would be more efficient to handle the matter at my level first." Marcus realized that his request had been intercepted, and worse, that his activities had been discovered. The trap had been set and he had walked directly into it. Marcus stood perfectly still, his years of training helping him maintain composure despite the dangerous situation. Lord Chancellor Aldrich's office felt smaller than usual, the walls seeming to press in as the two unfamiliar guards positioned themselves strategically near the door. "Please, sit." Aldrich gestured to the chair across from his ornate desk. "We have much to discuss." Marcus remained standing, his hand instinctively moving toward his sword before he remembered where he was. Drawing a weapon in the Chancellor's office would be considered treason, regardless of the circumstances. "I prefer to stand, my lord," Marcus replied carefully. "My business won't take long." Aldrich's smile never wavered, but his eyes grew cold. "Oh, but I think it will. You see, Marcus, we know about your little nighttime wanderings, your curiosity about matters that don't concern a simple guard." The words confirmed Marcus's worst fears. They had been watching him, probably since the moment he overheard that first conversation in the archives. He wondered how long he had before this meeting took a deadly turn. "I'm not sure what you mean, my lord," Marcus said, buying time while his mind raced through possible escape routes. The office had one window, but it was 3 stories up and faced the inner courtyard where other guards would surely see him. "Don't insult my intelligence." Aldrich stood and walked around the desk, moving with the confidence of a man who held all the power. "You witnessed our business arrangement. You saw the merchandise, and now you think your precious loyalty to the king requires you to expose what you believe is corruption." Marcus said nothing, but his silence was answer enough. "The truth is far more complicated than your simple mind can grasp," Aldrich continued. "What you stumbled upon isn't corruption. It's survival. The kingdom faces threats you can't even imagine, and sometimes survival requires making difficult choices." "What threats?" Marcus asked, genuinely curious despite the danger. "Our borders are secure. We're at peace with our neighbors." Aldrich laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the stone walls. "Peace is an illusion, my dear Marcus. While the king plays diplomat and dreams of harmony, real predators circle our kingdom like wolves. The Northern Empire grows stronger every year. The Southern Confederation has been testing our border defenses. Even our supposed allies would happily carve up our lands if they sensed weakness." The Chancellor moved to a large map mounted on the wall, pointing to various locations as he spoke. "These weapons we sell, they don't go to our enemies. They go to smaller kingdoms and city-states that serve as buffers between us and the real threats. We arm them, they protect our interests, and everyone benefits." Marcus frowned, trying to process this information. "If that's true, why keep it secret from the king?" "Because our beloved king is the idealist," Aldrich said with obvious frustration. "He believes problems can be solved with words and treaties. He would never approve of what he'd see as warmongering, even if it's actually preventing war." The explanation almost made sense, but something still felt wrong. Marcus had seen enough of politics to know that noble intentions could hide darker truths. "And the foreign man? Who is he?" "A broker. Someone who handles the practical details of our arrangements so that the kingdom's hands remain officially clean." Aldrich returned to his chair, leaning back as if discussing routine paperwork. The gold from these transactions has funded improvements to our own military. Better roads, stronger walls. The king sees the results and assumes it's all from honest trade. Marcus wanted to believe it, wanted to think that what he had discovered was actually a clever strategy to protect the kingdom, but his instincts, honed by 15 years of guard duty, told him there was more to the story. Where exactly do these weapons go? He pressed. Which kingdoms and city-states? Aldrich's expression tightened slightly. That information is above your security clearance, I'm afraid. The less people know about specific details, the safer everyone remains. The evasion confirmed Marcus's suspicions. If the weapons sales were truly defensive in nature, there would be no reason to hide the destinations. The fact that Aldrich wouldn't provide specifics suggested something far more troubling. I want to speak with the king, Marcus said firmly. If these sales are for the kingdom's benefit, he should know about them. He should be able to make an informed decision. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The two guards by the door shifted slightly, their hands moving to their weapon hilts. I'm afraid that's not possible, Aldrich said quietly. You see, Marcus, you've reached a crossroads. You can choose to trust in the wisdom of your superiors and continue your duties without asking uncomfortable questions, or you can continue down this dangerous path of misguided righteousness. Are you threatening me? Marcus asked, though the answer was obvious. I'm offering you a choice, Aldrich corrected. Join us officially. Accept a promotion to captain, with a substantial increase in pay and responsibilities that would keep you busy with other matters. Your family would benefit greatly from such advancement. The mention of his family sent a chill through Marcus. He had a wife and 2 young children living in the town beyond the palace walls. The implication was clear. Cooperate or face consequences that would extend beyond himself. And if I refuse? Aldrich spread his hands in a gesture of regret. Then I'm afraid your services as a guard would no longer be required. Perhaps you'd find better opportunities in some distant province far from the capital. Marcus understood. Refusal meant exile at best, death at worst. But accepting meant becoming complicit in whatever dark scheme was really unfolding. His oath to protect the kingdom included protecting it from internal threats, even if those threats came from the highest levels of government. I need time to think, Marcus said, knowing he was stalling but hoping to buy enough time to figure out his next move. Of course, Aldrich nodded graciously. Take tonight to consider your options. We'll meet again tomorrow morning to discuss your decision. As Marcus turned to leave, Aldrich added casually, Oh, and Marcus, don't try anything foolish, for your family's sake as well as your own. Marcus left the office with his mind reeling. The guards followed him at a discreet distance as he made his way through the palace corridors, confirming that he was now under constant surveillance. Every person he passed could be a potential ally or enemy, and he had no way of knowing which. The weight of his discovery pressed down on him like a physical burden. The kingdom he had sworn to protect was being betrayed from within, but exposing that betrayal would likely cost him everything he held dear. The simple life of a loyal guard had suddenly become impossibly complicated. As evening fell, Marcus found himself standing at his usual post, going through the motions of his duties while his thoughts churned. Tomorrow he would have to choose between his conscience and his family's safety. Tonight he had to figure out if there was any way to serve both. Marcus barely slept that night. He lay in his small quarters within the palace, staring at the ceiling, while his mind worked through every possible scenario. The walls that had once felt like protection now seemed like prison bars, and the familiar sounds of the palace at night carried an ominous quality they had never possessed before. By dawn, he had made his decision. He would not become part of Aldrich's conspiracy, but he also could not directly confront forces so much more powerful than himself. Instead, he would find another way to serve the kingdom's true interests. The morning brought an unexpected opportunity. As Marcus made his rounds, he encountered Sir Edmund, one of the king's most trusted knights and a man whose integrity was beyond question. Sir Edmund had served the royal family for 20 years and had a reputation for absolute honesty, even when it was politically inconvenient. Good morning, Marcus. Sir Edmund greeted him warmly. I trust all is well with palace security? The innocent question felt like providence. Marcus glanced around to ensure they were alone, then made a decision that would change everything. Actually, Sir Edmund, there's something important I need to discuss with you. Something that affects the kingdom's safety. Sir Edmund's expression grew serious immediately. What kind of threat? Not here. Marcus said quietly. Too many ears in the palace these days. Could we meet somewhere private this evening? Perhaps the old chapel in the woods? The suggestion of meeting at the abandoned chapel outside the palace grounds was deliberate. It was a place where they could speak freely, without fear of being overheard. And it held special significance for both men as the site where they had both taken their oaths of service years earlier. Sir Edmund studied Marcus's face carefully, clearly recognizing the gravity of the situation. Very well. 1 hour after sunset. But Marcus, if this is some kind of political maneuvering, I want no part of it. It's not political, sir. It's about loyalty to the crown and protecting the kingdom from its enemies. That evening, Marcus made his way through the woods to the small stone chapel that had served the palace community for generations before falling into disuse. Sir Edmund was already there, his tall frame silhouetted against the last rays of sunlight filtering through the broken windows. Speak freely, Sir Edmund said without preamble. What have you discovered? Marcus told him everything. The overheard conversation, the secret weapons shipments, his confrontation with Lord Chancellor Aldrich, and the threats against his family. He spoke carefully and precisely, presenting facts without interpretation, letting Sir Edmund draw his own conclusions. When Marcus finished, Sir Edmund was silent for a long moment, his face grave in the twilight. These are serious accusations, Marcus. If true, they suggest treason at the highest levels of government. I know what I saw, sir, and I know what I heard. I believe you, Sir Edmund said finally, but the question is what to do about it. Aldrich wields enormous influence with the king. A simple guard's word against the Lord Chancellor's would carry little weight, especially without concrete proof. Marcus had expected this response. Then we need to gather proof. Real evidence that can't be dismissed or explained away. That would be extremely dangerous, Sir Edmund warned. If Aldrich is truly involved in something this serious, he won't hesitate to eliminate anyone who threatens to expose him. The danger exists whether we act or not, Marcus replied. At least if we gather evidence, we can protect the kingdom. Sir Edmund paced the small chapel, his boots echoing off the stone floor. There might be a way. The king has been asking questions lately about irregularities in the treasury reports. Not suspicions exactly, but curiosity about certain unexplained income sources. If we could provide him with specific information, what kind of information? Documentation, shipping manifests, payment records, correspondence with foreign buyers. The kind of evidence that would force an official investigation. Marcus felt a surge of hope. How do we get that information? Carefully, Sir Edmund said. And with help from people we trust absolutely. I have contacts within the palace staff, people who've served faithfully for years and who would be appalled to learn about this betrayal. Over the next hour, they developed a plan. Sir Edmund would discreetly approach certain trusted servants and minor officials, people who had access to records and documents but who weren't important enough to be closely watched by Aldrich's allies. Marcus would continue his normal duties while carefully observing the weapons operations, noting times, locations, and personnel involved. Most importantly, Sir Edmund emphasized, we need to identify exactly who is buying these weapons and what they're being used for. Aldrich's claim that they're going to defensive allies might be true, or it might be a cover for something much worse. As they prepared to leave the chapel, Sir Edmund placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. You're taking an enormous risk by bringing this to my attention. Your family will be in danger if this goes wrong. My family will be in danger anyway if these weapons end up in the wrong hands. Marcus replied, if Aldrich is arming enemies of the kingdom, we could face invasion or war. At least this way, we have a chance to prevent it. The next few days passed with agonizing slowness. Marcus went through the motions of normal guard duty, while constantly watching for signs that his activities had been detected. He attended his scheduled meeting with Aldrich and reluctantly agreed to consider the promotion offer, buying time while the real investigation continued. Sir Edmund worked his own network of contacts, gradually gathering pieces of information from various sources. The treasury clerk mentioned unusual gold deposits that didn't match any official trade agreements. The head of the Royal Archives noted that certain restricted documents had been accessed without proper authorization. The stablemaster reported that unmarked wagons had been using the palace loading areas during unusual hours. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. One of the kitchen servants, A middle-aged woman named Elena, who had worked in the palace for nearly 30 years, approached Sir Edmund with information that changed everything. "Sir," she said nervously, "you asked us to report anything unusual we might have noticed. Well, I cleaned Lord Chancellor Aldrich's private chambers, and yesterday I found something strange." Elena produced a crumpled piece of parchment from her apron. He had thrown this away, but it fell behind his desk instead of into the fire. "I thought it might be important." Sir Edmund examined the document carefully. It was a partial letter, written in the same foreign hand Marcus had described, but the contents made his blood run cold. "The northern territories will be ours within the month," the letter read. "Your weapons have given our forces the advantage we needed. The king's pacifist policies have left his borders practically undefended. When we strike, resistance will be minimal." The letter was addressed to our valued partner and signed with an unfamiliar seal, but the implications were terrifyingly clear. The weapons weren't going to defensive allies. They were being sold to enemies planning to invade the kingdom. Sir Edmund looked up at Elena, who was wringing her hands nervously. "You may have just saved the kingdom, Elena, but from now on your life may be in danger. Do you have somewhere safe you can stay?" "My sister lives in the countryside, sir. I could visit her for a while. Go tonight. Take nothing that would suggest you're leaving permanently. But don't return until this matter is resolved." As Elena hurried away, Sir Edmund realized that the situation had become far more urgent than anyone had imagined. They weren't just dealing with corruption or illegal arms sales. They had uncovered an active conspiracy that threatened the very existence of the kingdom. The time for careful investigation had passed. Now they needed to act quickly, before the enemies gathering on the borders could complete their preparations for war. Sir Edmund knew that time was running out. The letter fragment Elena had discovered meant that enemy forces were already mobilizing, armed with weapons sold to them by the kingdom's own Lord Chancellor. Every day of delay brought the threat closer to the palace gates. The challenge was reaching the king with credible evidence before Aldrich could silence them or complete whatever final preparations the conspiracy required. Sir Edmund had served the royal family long enough to know that King William was a thoughtful man who would listen to serious concerns. But he was also cautious about accusations against trusted advisors. The solution came from an unexpected direction. The king's youngest daughter, Princess Catherine, had always been curious about palace affairs and had developed friendships with many of the staff members. Unlike her father, she was naturally suspicious of political maneuvering and had often questioned some of Lord Chancellor Aldrich's more secretive activities. Sir Edmund found the princess in the palace gardens, where she often spent her mornings reading and enjoying the fresh air. She looked up from her book as he approached, immediately sensing his serious demeanor. "Sir Edmund, you look troubled. Is something wrong with palace security?" "Your Highness, I need to speak with you about a matter of grave importance to the kingdom. But I must ask that you keep our conversation completely confidential until you decide how to proceed." Princess Catherine set down her book and gave him her full attention. "You have my word, Sir Edmund." "What has happened?" Sir Edmund carefully explained the situation, beginning with Marcus's discovery and continuing through their investigation and Elena's crucial find. He showed her the letter fragment, watching her expression grow increasingly alarmed as she read the damning words. "This is treason," she said quietly. "Lord Chancellor Aldrich has been selling weapons to our enemies while they plan to invade our kingdom." "That appears to be the case, Your Highness. But we need more evidence before we can present this to the king. A single letter fragment, however damning, might not be enough to convince him to act against such a trusted advisor." Princess Catherine stood and began pacing among the flower beds, her mind clearly working through the implications. What kind of additional evidence would be needed? Ideally, we would need documentation showing the full extent of the weapons sales, proof of payment from enemy forces, and evidence of Aldrich's direct involvement in planning the invasion. And where would such evidence be kept? Sir Edmund hesitated, knowing that his next words would place the princess in considerable danger. Most likely in Aldrich's private office or his personal chambers. Both locations are heavily guarded and accessible only to the most trusted individuals, or to members of the royal family, Princess Catherine said with a meaningful look. "Your Highness, I cannot ask you to take such a risk. If you were discovered searching through the Lord Chancellor's private papers—" "You're not asking," she interrupted firmly. "I'm volunteering. This is my kingdom too, Sir Edmund, and my family that's being betrayed. I won't stand by and do nothing while enemies prepare to attack us." That evening, Princess Catherine put her plan into action. She visited Lord Chancellor Aldrich's office under the pretext of discussing arrangements for an upcoming royal ceremony. Aldrich was, as expected, deferential and accommodating to the princess's requests, but she noticed his nervousness when she asked detailed questions about the kingdom's finances and security. "Preparations I've been reading about statecraft," she explained when Aldrich seemed surprised by her questions. "Father thinks I should understand more about how the kingdom functions." "Of course, Your Highness. Education is always valuable, though perhaps some subjects are too complex for a woman?" Catherine asked sweetly, noting how quickly Aldrich had fallen into the trap of underestimating her. "Not at all, Your Highness. I merely meant that some matters require years of experience to fully comprehend." While they talked, Catherine carefully observed the layout of Aldrich's office, noting the location of filing cabinets, the desk drawers, and a small safe built into the wall behind a tapestry. She also made mental notes about which keys Aldrich carried and how he secured various documents. The actual search would have to wait for a better opportunity, one that came 3 days later when Aldrich was called away to handle a minor diplomatic crisis in a neighboring province. Princess Catherine volunteered to oversee some routine administrative matters in his absence, giving her legitimate access to his office during normal business hours. Working quickly but carefully, she searched through files and documents, looking for anything related to weapons sales, foreign payments, or military intelligence. Most of what she found was routine government business, but hidden in the back of a locked drawer, she discovered a leather portfolio that contained exactly what they needed. The portfolio held detailed records of weapons shipments going back over 2 years. The buyers were clearly identified as military commanders from the Northern Empire and other hostile territories. Payment records showed enormous sums of gold flowing into secret accounts that Aldrich controlled personally. Most damning of all were copies of correspondence between Aldrich and enemy generals, discussing not only weapons sales but detailed information about the kingdom's military weaknesses and defensive preparations. One letter made Catherine's hands shake as she read it. It was from General Thorne of the Northern Empire, thanking Aldrich for providing maps of the kingdom's border fortifications and promising him a position of power in the new government that would be established after the invasion succeeded. Princess Catherine quickly made copies of the most important documents, using skills she had learned from watching scribes work in the royal archives. She returned the originals to their hiding place and secured the copies in her own private chambers. That same evening, she met with Sir Edmund and Marcus at the abandoned chapel to share her discoveries. Both men were horrified by the extent of the betrayal revealed in the documents. "This goes far beyond selling weapons," Sir Edmund said grimly. "Aldrich has provided our enemies with intelligence about our military capabilities, our defensive positions, everything they would need to plan a successful invasion." Marcus studied one of the maps that showed guard positions and patrol routes around the palace itself. "According to this, they know exactly when and where our defenses are weakest. When the attack comes, they'll be able to strike at the most vulnerable points. The attack is planned for the new moon. Just 8 days from now," Princess Catherine added, pointing to a calendar notation in one of the letters. "They want the darkest night possible to move their forces into position without being detected." The 3 conspirators looked at each other, realizing that they now faced an impossible deadline. They had the evidence needed to expose Aldrich's treason, but they also had to convince the king to take immediate action to defend against an imminent invasion. "We have to present this to Father tonight," Princess Catherine decided. "We can't wait any longer." "Your Highness," Sir Edmund said carefully, "are you prepared for what might happen when we reveal this? Lord Chancellor Aldrich will deny everything and claim that we're the real traitors. He has allies throughout the court who will support him." "Then we'll have to make sure our evidence is absolutely convincing," she replied, "and we'll have to be ready for whatever comes next." As they prepared to return to the palace and confront the king with the terrible truth, none of them knew that their activities had not gone entirely unnoticed. One of Aldrich's spies had observed Princess Catherine's unusual interest in administrative matters, and the Lord Chancellor was already beginning to suspect that his secret was no longer safe. The next few hours would determine whether the kingdom could be saved from the betrayal within its own walls. or whether the conspiracy would succeed in delivering it to its enemies. King William sat in his private study. The weight of the evidence spread across his desk like a physical burden. The copied documents, maps, and letters painted a picture of betrayal so complete that he struggled to comprehend its scope. His most trusted advisor had not only been selling weapons to enemies, but had provided them with detailed intelligence about the kingdom's defenses and was actively collaborating in planning an invasion. "How long has this been going on?" the king asked quietly, his voice heavy with a mixture of anger and sorrow. "According to the documents, at least 2 years, Your Majesty," Sir Edmund replied. "Possibly longer. The earliest records Princess Catherine found date back to shortly after the harvest festivals of 2 years past." Princess Catherine sat beside her father, her hand resting supportively on his arm. "Father, I know this is difficult to accept, but we have very little time. The invasion is planned for 6 days from now during the new moon." King William looked up at Marcus, who had remained silent throughout their presentation. "Marcus, you were the first to discover this conspiracy. In your opinion as a soldier, how serious is our situation?" Marcus straightened, feeling the full weight of speaking directly to his sovereign. "Your Majesty, based on what Lord Chancellor Aldrich has revealed to our enemies, they know our patrol schedules, guard positions, and the locations of our weapon stores. They know which gates are most vulnerable, and when our defenses are at their weakest. If they attack as planned, we'll be fighting at a severe disadvantage." The king stood and moved to the window, looking out at the palace grounds where his subjects lived and worked, unaware of the danger approaching them. "What are our options?" "We could arrest Lord Chancellor Aldrich immediately," Sir Edmund suggested. "Seize control of his network and try to determine exactly which enemy forces are involved. That would alert them that we know about the invasion," Princess Catherine pointed out. "They might accelerate their timeline or change their plans entirely, but it would also give us time to strengthen our defenses and call for reinforcements from our allies," the king said thoughtfully. Marcus cleared his throat respectfully. "Your Majesty, there might be another option. What if we let Lord Chancellor Aldrich believe his secret is still safe, but we use our knowledge of the invasion plans to set a trap?" All eyes turned to the guard, surprised by the suggestion. "Explain," the king commanded. "The enemy expects to find us unprepared and vulnerable, but if we secretly reinforce our defenses and position additional troops in the locations they plan to attack, we could turn their own strategy against them. Instead of achieving surprise, they would be walking into an ambush." Sir Edmund nodded slowly, seeing the merit in the plan. "It's risky, Your Majesty. We would have to act as if nothing had changed while secretly preparing for war. One mistake, one person who let something slip, and the entire plan would collapse. But if it worked," Princess Catherine added, "we wouldn't just defend against this invasion. We could capture the enemy commanders and potentially end the threat permanently." King William returned to his desk, studying the invasion plans that Aldrich had helped develop. According to these documents, they expect to strike simultaneously at 3 points: the main gate, the river entrance, and the old castle wall. They believe all 3 locations will be lightly defended. "We could secretly move additional troops to each location," Marcus suggested. "Position them where they wouldn't be visible to enemy scouts but ready to respond when the attack begins." "What about Lord Chancellor Aldrich himself?" the king asked. "We can't simply ignore his treason, but arresting him too early could ruin everything." Princess Catherine had been thinking about this problem throughout their discussion. "Father, what if we give him a task that would take him away from the palace during the crucial period? Something that would seem important and necessary, but that would actually keep him from interfering with our preparations or alerting his allies." "What kind of task?" "Send him to negotiate with the Southern Confederation about trade agreements. Make it seem urgent, something that requires his personal attention and expertise. By the time he realizes what's happening, the invasion will have failed and he'll be too far away to escape." The plan was audacious and risky, but as they discussed the details, it began to seem feasible. They would need to coordinate secretly with the kingdom's military commanders, reinforcing critical positions without alerting anyone who might be working with Aldrich. They would have to maintain normal palace routines while preparing for a battle that could determine the kingdom's survival. "Sir Edmund, can you be certain of the loyalty of our senior military officers?" the king asked. "Most of them, yes, Your Majesty, but we should be selective about who we inform of the full situation. The fewer people who know the complete truth, the less chance of the information reaching the wrong ears. Over the next 2 hours, they developed a comprehensive counterplan. Sir Edmund would secretly contact the most trusted military commanders, informing them that intelligence suggested a possible border incursion and that defensive preparations needed to be strengthened. He would not mention the full extent of Aldrich's betrayal unless absolutely necessary. Princess Catherine would arrange for the Southern Confederation mission, making it appear to be her own idea based on recent diplomatic developments. The timing would be presented as coincidental but essential. Marcus would continue his normal guard duties, while secretly coordinating with Sir Edmund to identify any other palace staff who might be working with Aldrich. They had discovered one traitor, but experience suggested there were likely others. Most importantly, the king emphasized, we must act as if nothing has changed. Aldrich is intelligent and observant. If he suspects that we've discovered his activities, he could send word to his allies and ruin everything. The next morning brought the first test of their deception. Lord Chancellor Aldrich returned from his diplomatic mission, appearing calm and confident as he resumed his normal duties. He met with the king to discuss routine matters, showing no sign of concern or suspicion. Your Majesty, Aldrich said smoothly. I trust everything proceeded smoothly in my absence. Of course, the king replied, maintaining his usual demeanor despite the knowledge burning inside him. Princess Catherine has been helping with some administrative tasks. She's quite capable. Indeed she is, Your Majesty. Education is so important for young people, even if they sometimes show interest in matters beyond their understanding. The casual dismissal of his daughter's intelligence angered the king, but he hid his reaction behind a neutral expression. Speaking of administrative matters, I've been thinking about those trade negotiations with the Southern Confederation. The situation seems to be developing quickly. Aldrich's eyes sharpened slightly. Has something specific occurred, Your Majesty? Princess Catherine brought some reports to my attention. Apparently there are new opportunities for grain exports, but the window for negotiation may be limited. The king delivered the lie smoothly, having practiced it with his daughter. I was thinking that someone with your expertise should handle the matter personally. When would such a mission need to depart? Within 2 days, ideally. I know it's short notice, but these opportunities don't wait for convenient timing. Marcus, standing at his post near the door, watched Aldrich's face carefully. For just a moment, the Chancellor seemed troubled, as if calculating whether he could afford to be away from the palace. Then his expression cleared. Of course, Your Majesty. I serve at your pleasure. I'll make the necessary preparations immediately. After Aldrich left, the king allowed himself a moment of relief. The first phase of their plan had succeeded. Now came the more dangerous part, preparing their defenses while maintaining the illusion that nothing had changed. Sir Edmund met secretly with General Morrison, the kingdom's most experienced military commander. Without revealing the full scope of Aldrich's betrayal, he explained that intelligence suggested enemy forces might be planning border raids during the new moon. What's the source of this intelligence? General Morrison asked. Multiple sources, but nothing we can confirm absolutely, Sir Edmund replied carefully. His Majesty believes we should strengthen our defensive positions as a precautionary measure. Sensible. Where do you want me to focus our additional troops? Sir Edmund consulted the invasion plans they had copied from Aldrich's files. The main gate, the river approach, and the old castle wall. These locations seem most vulnerable to a surprise attack. General Morrison nodded, already mentally organizing the troop movements. I'll position additional forces during night hours, when they're less likely to be observed. We'll maintain normal patrol schedules during the day to avoid appearing suspicious. Meanwhile, Princess Catherine worked to finalize the Southern Confederation mission. She met with the palace's diplomatic staff, discussing trade opportunities and negotiation strategies with enough enthusiasm to make the mission appear genuinely important. Lord Chancellor Aldrich is the ideal person for these negotiations, she told the chief diplomat. His experience with economic matters would be invaluable. Indeed, Your Highness. Though the timing is somewhat sudden, the best opportunities often are, she replied smoothly. That's what makes them valuable. As the preparations continued, the night of the new moon arrived with an eerie stillness that seemed to blanket the entire kingdom. Marcus stood at his assigned position near the main gate, but unlike countless previous nights, he knew that enemy forces were moving through the darkness toward the palace. The weight of his sword felt different somehow, heavier with the knowledge that it might soon taste blood in defense of everything he held dear. Lord Chancellor Aldrich had departed for the Southern Confederation 3 days earlier, his farewell to the king appearing genuine and concerned. "I hope to return with excellent news about the trade agreements, Your Majesty," he had said, clasping the king's hand warmly. Even knowing the truth, the performance had been convincing enough to make Marcus wonder if they might somehow be wrong about the man's treachery. But the evidence was undeniable, and now the kingdom's fate hung in the balance of their desperate gamble. Hidden throughout the palace grounds, additional troops waited in concealment, ready to spring their trap when the invasion began. The normal guard rotations continued as scheduled, maintaining the illusion of routine while secretly reinforced positions prepared for battle. Princess Catherine had insisted on remaining in the palace despite her father's attempts to send her to safety. "This is my kingdom too," she had argued. "I helped uncover this plot and I'll see it through to the end." She waited now in the royal chambers with the king, both of them listening for the first sounds of combat that would signal the beginning of the attack. Sir Edmund moved quietly through the palace corridors, making final checks on their defensive preparations. The reinforced positions were well concealed, and the additional troops remained disciplined and silent. Everything was as ready as it could be, but he knew that no plan survived first contact with the enemy unchanged. The attack began at precisely midnight, just as Aldrich's stolen documents had predicted. The first sign was a soft whistle from one of the watchtowers, the signal that suspicious movement had been detected near the river approach. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he gripped his spear more tightly, knowing that within minutes the palace would become a battlefield. The enemy forces moved with the confidence of attackers who believed they held every advantage. They approached the 3 designated targets simultaneously, their movements coordinated and precise. The advanced scouts had reported guard positions exactly as expected, and the infiltration routes were clear of obstacles. At the river entrance, the first wave of invaders reached the water gate that should have been lightly defended by 2 drowsy guards. Instead, they found themselves facing a concealed force of 20 veteran soldiers who had been waiting in the darkness for hours. The surprise was complete and devastating. "For the kingdom," shouted Captain Hayes as his hidden troops emerged from their positions, surrounding the startled invaders before they could retreat or call for help. The battle at the river entrance was over almost before it began, but it was only the opening move in a larger conflict. The main assault force approached the palace's primary gate, where they expected to find the usual complement of 4 guards and an unlocked side entrance that Aldrich had promised would provide easy access to the inner courtyard. Marcus was one of those 4 guards, but he was supported by 30 additional soldiers concealed behind the gatehouse and surrounding structures. As the enemy forces moved into position, he could see their leader consulting what appeared to be a detailed map of the palace defenses, undoubtedly one of the documents that Aldrich had provided. The enemy commander raised his hand to signal the attack, and Marcus felt time seemed to slow as he prepared to defend his home. The gate exploded inward as the invaders charged forward, expecting to overwhelm the minimal defenses they had been promised. Instead, they ran directly into a killing zone that the defenders had prepared specifically for this moment. Archers emerged from concealed positions on the walls above, while heavily armed soldiers poured out of hiding places throughout the courtyard. The invaders found themselves trapped in a space that had been turned into a carefully designed trap. The fighting was fierce but brief. The enemy soldiers were skilled and determined, but they had been caught completely off guard and were badly outnumbered. Within minutes, those who survived the initial clash were surrendering or attempting to flee back toward the gate. At the old castle wall, the third prong of the invasion met a similar fate. The ancient fortification that appeared to be crumbling and lightly defended was actually reinforced with hidden supports and manned by some of the kingdom's best archers. The scaling ladders that the invaders brought proved inadequate for walls that were taller and stronger than their intelligence had suggested. As dawn broke over the palace, the attempted invasion had been completely defeated. Enemy soldiers who had survived the fighting were being questioned by Sir Edmund and his intelligence officers, while the palace staff worked to repair the damage and tend to the wounded. King William emerged from the royal chambers as the last of the fighting ended, surveying the scene with a mixture of relief and sadness. The kingdom had been saved, but the cost of Aldrich's betrayal would be felt for years to come. The trust that had been broken would take generations to fully repair, Your Majesty, Sir Edmund approached with a preliminary report. We have captured 43 enemy soldiers, including 2 commanders. The interrogations are already providing valuable information about the extent of the conspiracy. And our casualties? Surprisingly light thanks to our preparations. 12 wounded, none seriously, and no deaths among our forces. Princess Catherine joined them, her dress still rumpled from the long night of waiting and worry. What about Lord Chancellor Aldrich? He'll surely learn that the invasion failed and try to flee. I've already dispatched riders to intercept him, Sir Edmund reported. He should be arrested within the day, assuming he hasn't already received word and fled. Marcus approached the group, still carrying his bloodied spear but walking with the quiet satisfaction of duty well done. Your Majesty, if I may ask, what will happen to the families of the guards who were working with the conspirators? The question highlighted one of the most painful aspects of the entire affair. Several palace staff members had been revealed as part of Aldrich's network, their loyalty bought with gold or secured through threats. Their betrayal had endangered everyone in the palace, but their families were innocent of any wrongdoing. They will not be punished for crimes they didn't commit, the king said firmly. But they will need to find new lives elsewhere. The palace can no longer be their home. As the immediate crisis passed, the full scope of what had been prevented became clear. The captured commanders revealed that the invasion had been planned as the opening move in a larger campaign of conquest. Success at the palace would have been followed by coordinated attacks on other major cities throughout the kingdom, with Aldrich providing intelligence and assistance for each phase. The weapons sales had been just one part of a comprehensive plan to weaken the kingdom from within while strengthening its enemies. Border defenses had been secretly compromised, military supplies had been diverted, and key defensive positions had been mapped and surveyed by enemy agents posing as merchants. 2 weeks later, Lord Chancellor Aldrich was brought back to the palace in chains. His capture had been easier than expected. Confident in his plan's success, he had made no preparations for escape, and was taken completely by surprise when royal soldiers arrived at his diplomatic mission. Standing in the throne room where he had once wielded enormous power, Aldrich appeared smaller and older than Marcus remembered. The confidence and authority that had made him so formidable were gone, replaced by the bitter resignation of a man who had gambled everything and lost. Do you have anything to say in your defense? King William asked, his voice heavy with disappointment rather than anger. Aldrich straightened his shoulders one final time, meeting his former king's eyes without flinching. I believe the kingdom needed stronger leadership to survive the challenges ahead. You were too trusting, too willing to believe in peace when enemies surrounded us on every side. So you decided to help those enemies destroy us. I decided to ensure that when change came, it would come on terms that preserved something of what we had built. The Northern Empire offered stability and strength. You offered only noble ideals. The king shook his head sadly. And in pursuing that stability, you would have sacrificed the freedom and lives of thousands of innocent people. Aldrich had no answer for that accusation, and his silence spoke more clearly than any words could have. Marcus watched the proceedings from his position near the door, reflecting on how much had changed since that morning when he first overheard suspicious voices in the archives. His simple life as a palace guard had been shattered and rebuilt, and he had learned that loyalty sometimes required terrible choices and enormous risks. In the end, the kingdom survived not because of grand strategies or political maneuvering, but because ordinary people like him and Elena and Princess Catherine had chosen to act when action was needed. They had risked everything to protect something larger than themselves, and their courage had made all the difference. As Lord Chancellor Aldrich was led away to face justice for his crimes, Marcus returned to his duties.